Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chaf Aleph, Daf 21 of Masechta Taanis. Friends, Daf Chaf Aleph is a Gewalt. Now, here's the thing, friends. Here's the thing. There's this concept I once heard called desperate times calls for desperate measures. Now, I never ever record Babylon Talmud when I am intoxicated on alcohol or any other thing. However, I have received intelligence that drinking whiskey helps with your voice. Now, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if maybe it doesn't help with the voice, it just helps with your confidence. But I'll go upon him. I'm going to try it out because, as I said, desperate times calls for desperate measures. So, friends, l'chaim, and I wish all of us, and specifically me, that Daf Chaf Aleph of Masechta Taanis is going to be gewaldig, because it is gewaldig. L'chaim. Alright, whiskey, okay, very good. Alright, well, wish us luck. Well, that was good. I think it's working. Alright, I think maybe it's working. Alright, well, we got plenty of whiskey here, so hopefully we'll get through this stuff. Wow, this is a good idea. I shouldn't get used to it, but not a bad idea. Alright, let's go weiter. Not a bad whiskey either. Alright. Well, I think it's helping. Well, at this rate, we're not going to get anywhere. Alright, Daf Chaf Aleph, Amud Aleph, all the way at the top. Friends, it's a gewaldige story with Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan. Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan have garse b'oraise. Ilfa and Rabbi Yochanan were taka learning Torah. The chiklu milsa tuva, but they were very poor lemaise. Now this was before Rabbi Yochanan was the great Rabbi Yochanan. This was like leading up to it. And at that time, they were both very poor. Amri, they said, Nekum v'nezov v'ne'avid iskov v'nekayim b'nafshin. So they said, well, no, what do you think they said? Let's go and make some money. Let's go into business. We'll open a geschäft. We'll make some money. And they said, and we'll say, Efes kilo yeh b'cha evyon, that the pasuk says that there won't be any paupers among you. So let us go and we'll make some money. And that way we won't have to be paupers. So osvei tuse guder re'ir. So they went the maise and they were sitting under a rickety wall. Havu kokaiche rifta, and they were eating bread. Also, Trei Malachi Asharis, and two angels came. And Rabbi Yochanan heard that one of the angels was saying to the other one, the angels were saying to each other, hey, Shimon, Reuben the angel was saying to Shimon the angel, Shimon, I have a good idea. Let's knock over this wall on these two fellows and kill them. Wouldn't that be so much fun? So, Shame Rabbi Yochanan, the Amr Chad, okay. So, how come they want to do this? Shemanichin Chai Olam Haba Voskim B'Chai Yeshua, because they are ignoring the eternal life, studying the Holy Torah, which will benefit them, which is an eternal life, and instead they're focusing on temporary, ephemeral things like making a buck. So, Omer le Idoch Shavkinu Dikibuchad Dikaimale Shaita. And Shimon the angel says, no, leave them alone, because one of them is going to be a very gewaldige individual. Rabbi Yechanan Shama, Ilfa Loi Shama. Now Rabbi Yechanan heard this dialogue between these two angels, and Ilfa did not hear the dialogue. Omele Rabbi Yechanan the Ilfa. Rabbi Yechanan says to Ilfa, Shama Ma'ar Midi, did you hear Epis? Omele Lo. And Ilfa says, no, I didn't hear anything. Did you hear something? Omar. And then Rabbi Yechanan says, Midishamoy Ono, from the fact that I heard this dialogue, Ilfa Loi Shama, and Ilfa did not hear the dialogue, Shmaminu Ledidi Kaim Lishaita, it must be that I, Rabbi Yochanan, am the one that the angels were talking about when they said that there's one person here who's going to be a gewaldige fellow. It must be me, Rabbi Yochanan. Shmaminu Ledidi Kaim Lishaita. So Amalei Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yechanan says to Ilfa, Ihader ve'oki ben afshoi, well, I'm going to go back to learning. I'm going to forget about the geschäft. I'm going to forget about going into business. And instead, I'm going to go back to learning ve'oki ben afshoi, and I will establish with myself, Kilo yechtal evyon mikerev haaretz, that the Eibishter will not abandon any, poor fellows in the land, and the Eibishter is going to take care of me. Rabbi Yechanan Hader, Ilfa lo Hader. So Rabbi Yechanan went back to the yeshiva, and Ilfa went weiter with the geschäft. He went weiter to make some money. Ado also Ilfa malach Rabbi Yochanan. By the time that Ilfa came back from his business trip, so Rabbi Yochanan was already appointed to be Rosh Yeshiva. Amrulo, and the people said to Ilfa, Osif my Vigaris, if you would have come back to learn like Rabbi Yechanan did, Lo hava malach mar, Rabbi Yechanan would not have been Rosh Yeshiva. Ilfa, if you would, instead of have gone out on business, if you would have come back to the yeshiva, you would have been the one who would have been Rosh Yeshiva. As Rashi points out, the Ilfa avigam mitzveh me Rabbi Yechanan, that Ilfa was taka a bigger Talmud Chacham than Rabbi Yechanan was. So Ilfa went tolanafshe be'askar desfinta, and he hung himself by the mast of a boat. He didn't hang himself to death. He was went in and was sort of climbed up upon the mast of a boat. Omar, and he proclaimed, how gewaldig is that? If anybody asks me anything of the Tosefta of Reb Chia and Reb Oshaya, Rashi says that it doesn't get better than this, that they were organizing the Brises into the Tosefta based on the adversarial, I don't know. I'm not going to make up a word. I feel like there's a word for this, but tutelage? I don't know. Of Rebbe. Okay, anyway, so Ilfa says, so he climbs up a mast and he says, if anybody can ask me any kasha, ask me anything from the Tosefta of Reb Chia and Reb Oshaya, and I will be unable to bring them an explanation from a Mishnah. I'm gonna jump from the mast and gonna drown. What do you do in such a case? So this is what happens. Eliyahu Navi comes, Tonale, and he says to Ilfa, the following brisa, following Tosefta. He says, Haomer, a fellow's on his deathbed, and he says, Tinusheka livnai b'Shabbos, and he says to a fellow, I want you to make sure that my children have a shekel every week. Every week, give them a shekel that they can have epis to live off of. The thing is that the fact of the matter is he has a bunch of children and a shekel isn't enough. They need a selah, which is 2 shekels, twice that amount. So knows selah. So what do? So you give them a selah. You give them what they need. Meaning, so when he says give them a shekel, it doesn't literally mean a shekel. It means give them what they need. So if they need a selah, so give them a selah. Okay? Al titnu loim ela shekel. And if he says it slightly differently, if he says only give them a shekel, al titnu loim ela shekel, do not give them anything but a shekel, well then einos loim ela shekel. Then they can only give the kids a shekel, not a selah. And if the fellow said that if my children die, so then other people should inherit it from, in their place, this money. So ben sha'amar tnu, ben sha'amar al titnu, hinos niloim el shekel. So then, and regardless, since he already indicated that there could be a situation in which other people would be getting this money if his children died, so then whether he said, give them a shekel, whether he said only give them a shekel, it doesn't matter. We are only going to give a shekel, not a selah, because we want to enable the possibility that maybe if the kids die, these other people would be able to chaperein. Ilfa says, that I can bring you a right that, because what did Ilfa say? Ilfa said, he challenged anybody, bring me a Tosefta and I'll bring you a proof from a Mishnah. So, Hahu Saba, which we assume to be Eliyahu Hanavi, so he came and he brought this Tosefta about this fellow who says to give some money to his kids. So Ilfa says, that's Reb Meir from the Mishnah who says mitzvah l'kayim divrei ames, that it's a mitzvah to establish what the deceased fellow said. If he said that these other people should be getting some money, so then you're only going to give a shekel. So he was able to bring a proof from a Mishnah. Excuse me, I'm going to sip a little more whiskey. 1 second. Alright, going weiter. So they said about Nachum ish Gamzu, friends. Nachum ish Gamzu. We saw him, I think, in Masechta Shkol. Here we see him in Masechta Taanis. They said about Nachum ish Gamzu. He was blind in both eyes. Gidem mishtei yodov. He was missing both hands. Kiteh mishtei raglav. And he was missing both of his feet. V'chol gufo malei shchin. And his whole body was full of boils. V'yemuto bevayis re'ur. And he was in a rickety house. V'raglei mitaso munachin b'sfalin shamayim. And the posts of his bed were in containers of water, so that ants wouldn't be able to climb up the legs of the bed onto him, because if they did, he'd be stuck, because he doesn't have arms, he doesn't have legs, he wouldn't be able to remove the ants. So therefore, the legs of his bed had to be in water, so that the ants wouldn't be able to climb up the legs of the bed. Pam achas, skip the brackets, pikshu tamid of lefanos mitaso, v'achar kach lefanos asakelim. One time, his students wanted to remove him on his bed out of his house, and then afterwards to take out all the vessels from the house. He said to them, Bonai, my children, pnuas akelim, achakach pnuas mitosi. First, remove the vessels, and then remove me in my bed. Shemove tachlochem, because it is guaranteed to you, kozman shani babayis ein abayis nofel. As long as I'm in this house isn't going anywhere. It's not going to fall. So they removed the vessels, and then they removed Nachum ish Gamzu, v'nofel habayis, and then of course the house fell down. And his student said to him, Nu Rebbe, Since it's clear that you are a complete righteous fellow, a complete tzaddik, how come your life is so shver right now? Right? Clearly you're a tzaddik gomer. How come you're the biggest nebuch in the world? He said to them, Bonai, my children, it's all my doing. It's all my fault. This is a Gemara that we saw in Shkolim, although in Shkolim I think it was slightly different. That one time I was traveling to my father-in-law's house. And I had 3 donkeys worth of provisions with me. One donkey was laden with foods. Another donkey was laden with drinks. A third donkey was laden with all types of treats. And a poor fellow came, and he said to me, Rebbe, Parneseni, can you spare epis for a fellow? And Nachum Ish Gamzu says, can you just wait 1 second while I remove these things from the donkey, and then I will be glad to help you. I think in the Gemara in Shkolim, he says, why don't you wait until I come back from my father-in-law? I think that's what it said over there. But here he says, just wait a second while I unload some things from the donkey. And I didn't have the opportunity to remove the items from the donkey before this fellow left this earth to rejoin his creator. He expired, he died. I went, says Nachum Ish Gamzu, and I fell on his face. And I said, my eyes that did not have mercy on your eyes, Yasumu, they should become blind. Yodai, my hands that did not have mercy on your hands, Yizgadmu, they should be removed. Raglai, my legs that didn't have mercy on your legs, Yizkato, they should be, gotten rid of. And that wasn't enough for me, says Nachum Ish Gamzu, until I said, Kol gufi yeh mali shchin, that my body should be full of boils. They said to him, they said, the students said to Nachum Ish Gamzu, woe to us that we have to see you in such a predicament. He said to them, he said it would be much worse if you didn't see me like this. I guess that he wanted the lesson to be clear. I'm not quite sure what the lesson is, but he was important to Nachum Ish Gamzu that they see him like this. And how come they call him Nachum Ish Gamzu? Because anything that would happen to Nachum Ish Gamzu, Omer Gamzu L'Tova, he would say this is also good. This is also for the good. Zimnachada bo l'shidure Yisrael doirin levekeser. One time, the Yidden, they needed to send a gift to the Caesar. Omru man Yezel. They said, well, who should we send the gift with? Yezel Nachum Ish Gamzu. They said, let's send Nachum Ish Gamzu, the Melumud Benisin, because miracles tend to happen to Nachum Ish Gamzu. Alright? Shadru biyade Malay Sifta Davanim Tovus Margolius. So they sent him with a container full of Givaldiga stones and things like that. Ozal Bas Audira Belelia, and he went and he stayed at a certain Kretschmer, certain lodging at night. And these nudniks who were staying at this krechmer, they chapterein all the contents of the container and filled it with dirt. Kimata awesome. And then when Nachumish Gamzu, unbeknownst to him, arrives at the Caesar with a container full of dirt, Sharinu the Sifta, Chazanu Dumalu Afra. So they opened up the gift, they opened up the box, and it was full of dirt. So the king wanted to kill the Chulu. He wanted to kill all the Yidden. It's very, very bad. He said, these Yidden are laughing at me. They're making fun of me. They send me a box full of dirt. Omar, so what do you think Nachmish Gamzu said? Gamzu Leteva, this is also for the good. Also Eliyahu, Yidmele, Kechad Minayu, Eliyahu Novi came and he appeared like one of the officials there by the Caesar. Omele Dilma, Ha'afra Me'afra D'Avram Avuonu. And Eliyahu Novi then suggested that perhaps this dirt is the dirt of Avraham Avinu. That when he would throw dirt, it would become swords. Gili Avugire, and when he would throw straw, they would become arrows. The Chsiv, as the Pasuk says, Yitin Kafar Charbo, that he makes like dirt his swords, Kikashnidav Kashtoi, and like straw his arrows. Now there was a certain country that the Caesar was unable to capture, but Kumine Vikavshua, and they tested out this dirt that Nachumish Gamzu brought, and sure enough, the dirt turned into swords, and they were able to capture this state, this country. So as a reward, they took Nachumish Gamzu into the treasury and filled up his box with all sorts of gewaldige stones. And they sent him off with great, great honor. Kiosu, when they came on the way home, Bisu Ba'u Diur. So they stayed at the same krechmer on the way back that they stayed on the way there. Omrulei, my ISIS Bahadoch, Davdiloch, Yikar Kuleai. And they said to Nachumish Gamzu, they said, why are they giving you so much covet? Omrulu, he said to them, my deshakli miacha amti lasum. Well, what I took from here, the dirt that I took from here, is what I brought to there. And apparently, it was very good dirt. So they said, wow, well, there's plenty more dirt where that came from. And they knocked down the krechmer, and they brought all the rubble of the krechmer to the Caesar. They said to him, that dirt that Nachumish Gamzu brought, that was our dirt, and there's plenty more of it. Here, take this dirt, and it's going to be, and enjoy it. So, but they tested out the dirt. It wasn't the same. It didn't make swords. So, and they killed these nudniks who swapped out Nachumish Gamzu's stones for dirt, and then tried to bring their own dirt. Didn't work out for them. They were all killed. So, sometimes it doesn't pay to be a nudnik. I'm not sure how much the whiskey is helping. I might just go back. I'm preparing a tea. I think I'm going to go back to tea in a few minutes. But in the meantime, I do have a little bit of whiskey to finish. Let's go weiter. So what's considered pestilence? So we say, well, if you have a city that the population is 500, and there are 3 fellows who die in 3 days, so then that's a pestilence. Tanu Rabbanon, or plague, maybe plague is a better word, but alright, so Tanu Rabbanon, Yer Motzia Chomesh Meos Be'elef Ragli Uwa. So what if you have a city that there are not 500 but 1,500 individuals? So Kigon Kfar Akko, such as Kfar Akko, V'yatsu Heimeno Tisha Mesim B'Shlosha Yomim, and there were 9 deceased in 3 days. One day after the next. Hareza Dever, it's a Dever. I don't know, how do you define Dever? Plague, pestilence, people dying. What do you want me to tell you? B'yom Echad or B'dal Yomim. But if all these people die in 1 day or in 4 days, Ein Ze Dever. That's not Dever. Dever is a formula. 500 people in the city, 1 a day for 3 days, or 1,500 people in the city, and 3 a day for 3 days, but no more, no less. We're very strict on the definition of a Dever. And a city with a population size of 500, Kigon Kfar Amiko, such as Kfar Amiko, V'yatzu Mimeno Shlosha Mesim B'gimel Yomim Ze Achar Ze, and there were 3 deceased in 3 days, 1 day after the next. Harez a Dever, it's a Dever B'yom Echad or B'arba Yomim, but if it's in 1 day or in 4 days, Ein Ze Dever, it's not Dever. Droikris, Yer Motzia Chomesh Meos Ragli Avo. There was a place called Droikris, and there were 500 people living there. V'yatzu Mimenu Shlosha Mesim B'yom Echad, and 3 fellows passed away in 1 day, because Rav Nachman by Rav Chizde, Taanis, and Rav Nachman by Rav Chizde said that we need a fast. Even though it was 3 people in 1 day, not 3 people in 3 days, Rav Nachman by Rav Chizde said that they need a fast. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak Kiman, Rav Nachman by Yitzchak says, who was Rav Nachman by Rav Chizde based and get upon? Rav Meir, like Rav Meir the Omer, Richek Negichosov Chayev Kirv Negichosov Lo Kol Shekin. That when it comes to an ox, when an ox gores, depending on how many times it has gored in the past, the amount of money that needs to be reimbursed is different. So a shor muad is a ox that has gored 3 times. The question is, does it need to gore in 3 times in 3 days, or what about 3 times in 1 day? And Reb Meir's opinion is that, well, if it's considered a shor muad, if it gores 3 times in 3 days, so then memele, it's gonna, a kal v'chomer, it should be considered a shor muad, a warned shor, if it gores 3 times in 1 day. If spread out over 3 days, it's a shor muad, then kal v'chomer, concentrated into even 1 day, would be considered a shor muad. It's more acute. Okay, fine. So therefore, based on that, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizde said that since 3 people died in 1 day, that they need to proclaim a fast day. Okay, the transition to tea has been made official. The Chaim to tea. Wow, not having a voice is modna. Alright, let's go weiter. So, Omelei, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizde, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok. So, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizde says to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok, Leikum mar leisi legabon. New Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok, why did you come to us? Where do you think Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizde was? In Surah maybe? And it was apparently Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok was not in a place of like big Talmidei Chachamim. So Rav Nachman bar Rav Chizde suggested to Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok that he come to him wherever he was, so that I guess it was a more gewaldige place. So Omelei Tanina. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok says, well, there's a brayso that says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, says Rabbi Yossi, Lo makom shel adam mechabdo, it's not a fellow's place that honors him. Elo adam mechabed es makom, friends. You hear this? That's some gold right there. It's not the place that makes a fellow special. It's a fellow that makes the place special. Shekein matzinu ba'ar Sinai, because we find by Mount Sinai, shekozman she'ashchina shruya olav, that as long as the Eibishter was on, that the divine presence was on Mount Sinai, Omer Teire, the Teire says, Gamatzon va'abakar al yira mula arahu, that the sheep and the cattle can't go near the mountain, because the divine presence was there. But nistalko shchino mimeno, but once the divine presence left Mount Sinai, Omer Teire, the Teire says, Bimshoch hayovel imayaylu v'ar, that after the long shofar blast, they can now go on the mountain. So we see that it wasn't the mountain that was special in and of itself, it was that the presence of the Eibishter was darting. And that was what was important. And similarly we find by the tent of meeting, by the Oil Moed in the Midbar, where Moshe would meet with the Eibishter, that as long as it was planted, that it was there, right? As long as the Mishkan was there, so then the Torah says, "Vishalchu min hamachne kol tzarua." Then it has to be pure. You can't have any lepers over there. Huglilu aparoches. But once they roll up the curtains and they move somewhere else, hutru zavin v'ametzorayim likanis sham. All of a sudden, zavs and metzoras can go over there. I.e., it's not the place that's inherently holy, it's what was there at the time. So then Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda says, well, if it's not about the place, then maybe I should go to you. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak responded to Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda, nonetheless, Yovomona ben Pras, Itzomona ben Mono, it makes more sense that me, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who is if you think about like a piece of bread, so you have a mana is a full piece of bread, a full loaf of bread, and a pras is half a loaf of bread. So Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, look, you are Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda. I am Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Chisda is greater than my father Yitzchak. So therefore it makes more sense that I, who is sort of a full loaf of bread, the son of a half a loaf of bread, should come to you, who are a full loaf of bread, the son of a full loaf of bread. Right, so mutav yavo mono ben paros, eitzo mono ben mono, val yavo mono ben mono, eitzo mono ben paros. It wouldn't make sense that you, who are the son of Rav Chisda, should come to me, who is just the son of a Pashder Yid, Yitzchak. In Besura, havos davrsa. In Surah, there was a certain plague and people were dying. Beshivavusi derav lo havos davrsa. But in Rav's neighborhood in Surah, there was no plague. So they figured, how come in all of Surah there's a plague, but in Rav's neighborhood there's no plague? It must be because Rav is very special. He's Rav. He has a lot of merit. So they appeared to these people in a dream, Rav the Nefishas Chuse Tuva, who Hamilsa Zutra Le. For Rav, who is so incredible, this is small beans to just be saved from death. So the Mishuma Ugaver the Shail Marav is Vila Likfur. Rather, the neighborhood was spared because in this neighborhood is a fellow who lends hoes and shovels to people who need them for burial, and therefore, sort of Mida Keneged Mida, he lends people implements for burial, therefore he was saved from death. B'Drokris, Havas Deleksa. So in Drokris, there was epis of fire. But in Rafuna's neighborhood, there was not a fire. So they figured, why was there no fire in Rafuna's neighborhood? Because Rafuna is amazing. So they appeared to these people who thought so in a dream. Ravuna, this is nothing for Ravuna. Rather, the neighborhood was spared because there's a certain woman who lends out her oven to her neighbors who need it. That's why the neighborhood was spared. Amrulay, Rav Yehuda Asukamtse, he said to Rav Yehuda that locusts are coming. Gazur Tainisa. So he made a fast day because the locusts are coming. Amrulei Lokam Afsidon. They said, yeah, but the locusts, we don't need a fast. The locusts aren't actually causing any damage. Amrulu Zavda Aisum Ba'adayu. He said, what, are they bringing rations with them? What, they brought their own food that they're not going to eat everything? Obviously they're going to eat everything. Fast. Amrulei Rav Yehuda. They said to Rav Yehuda, Ikamosana Bachazire. The pigs are dying. Gaza Tainisa. So they made up as a fast day. So does that imply that maybe according to Rav Yehuda, that when there's a sort of problem with one species, so it affects all the species, therefore since there's a problem with pigs, there could be problems with humans? No, specifically pigs are unique in that their intestines are similar to the intestines of humans, and therefore because of the similarity, since there was an issue with the pigs, maybe there would be an issue with the humans. They said to Shmuel that there is some kind of a death that's happening in the place called Bei Chozai, even though Shmuel lived in Nardah. And he proclaimed the fast day in Nardah. So they said to him, but isn't Bei Chozai far away from Nardah? He says, yeah, but there's no river that's going to stop it from traveling, right? We know all about spreading of disease. We live in the age of the pandemic, COVID-19. COVID-19 went all over the world. Even in New Zealand, there was COVID-19, and that's very far away. And for a long time, there wasn't COVID-19. I think it's back. Nobody was able to hide from COVID-19. And we see that sometimes when there are bad situations, they can travel quickly and far. They said to Rav Nachman, They said to Rav Nachman that there's some kind of a plague in Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Nachman, of course, was in Bavel, I think also in Nardah Lamaisa. Gazer Tainisa, so he proclaimed a fast day. Omar im Gvir lo Shifra lo Koshikin. His logic was that if the mistress, I think, is that the way to say it? Like the sort of master, if the master is getting smitten, then the maidservant certainly is going to get smitten. So if in Eretz Yisrael they're getting smitten, and certainly in Bavel they're going to get smitten. Taima de Gvir v'shivcha, or shivcha v'shivcha lo. So the reason why Rav Nachman was concerned was because there was a certain power imbalance here. If in Eretz Yisrael, which is more powerful, there was people dying, so the Memele in Bavel, which is like the maidservant, they're gonna be in trouble. But if they were both equals, like one place in Bavel and another place in Bavel, so then maybe there wouldn't be a concern. But what about the thing that we just said a minute ago, which is that they said to Shmuel that there was an issue in Bei Chozai, and he declared a fast in Nardah, even though they're both in Bavel. Shani Asim came in the Ikos Shayarta Dilavui Va'asya Ba'adeh. Well, since between Bei Chozai and Nardah there are like wagons and equivalent nowadays would be planes. There's international travel. People get mixed together and the disease can spread. So therefore, Shmuel declared a fast in Nardah. But if not for the fact that there was travel between the places, so then there wouldn't be that same, master-servant relationship. Hava umana, hava osile, shalma, imisifta derikia kolyoma. Friends, do you hear this? There was a certain bloodletter named Abba Umana, and he would get, they would say hello to him every single day from the heavenly yeshiva. Ulabai komai leyoma de Shabbata, l'rava komai leyoma de Kippure. Abaye, they would say, they would greet him from the heavenly academy every Erev Shabbos. and Rava every Erev Yom Kippur. That's amazing. Hava kochal shadaiti da Abaye mishum da Abba Umana. Now Abaye felt a little bit upset, insulted, or whatever, that Abba Umana, that they would say hello to him every day, and Abaye only once a week. Amrulei lomotzis lemebod kuuvde. They said, yeah, but you can't do like what Abba Umana does. What does he do? The Abba Umana, dichi hava ovid milsa hava machiz gabi lechud v'noshi lechud. When he would bloodlet, he would keep the men and the women separate. Visle levusha dizbei karna, and he had a special garment that had like the bloodletter's sucking instrument or something. Dava bezia ki kusilta, and there was a slit in the garment. Kavas asile itza, and when he had a female patient, ava malbishla, she would wear this garment, kiechitlo nistakobos, so that he wouldn't have to look at her any more than he needed to. Visle duchta detznia deshadi be pshite deshakil, and he had a separate room where he would collect his wages. There was like a pushka in the room. The isle shdive, the leisle lo michsiv. And if you could afford it, so then you paid, you put the money in the pushka. If you couldn't afford it, nobody would know because it was a completely separate room. You wouldn't have to be embarrassed. And when young Torah students would come, he wouldn't charge them. And after the bloodletting, Abba Umana would give these Torah students money, and he would say to the fellow, Zil bri nafshach, go and buy something to strengthen yourself after the bloodletting. So Abaye was, didn't understand how come Abba Umana, they greeted him every day from the Heavenly Academy, whereas Abaye himself only once a week. So one day he sent some students to check out Abba Umana. And sure enough, Abba Umana sat them down, he gave them food, gave them something to drink, and he gave them like, essentially a mattress, something to sleep on at night. And the next morning, these students basically took these mats that were given to them to sleep on, they folded them up, and they took them out to the marketplace to sell them. And they found Abba Umana, and they basically showed Abba Umana his own mats, and they said, would you like to buy this, and how much would you like to buy? How much do you think they're worth? He said to them, this is how much I think it's worth. They said to him, maybe they're worth more, right? They were trying to see if maybe they were going to, if maybe he was just saying a lower price to try to, take advantage of them. And he says, look, he says, no, look, this is what I paid for them. Then these Torah students said, the truth is, these mats are actually yours. We took them from you. And then they asked Abba Umana, when you saw us with these mats, what did you think that we were doing with your mats? He said, well, I assumed that you had a situation of pidyon shvuyim. You had to redeem captives, and you didn't have money, and you were embarrassed to ask for money, so you were going to sell these mats. And they said, okay, fine. Now at least, that we've revealed that these are your mats. Why don't you take them back? Well, from the time that I saw that you took these mats, and I figured that they were for pidyon shvuyim, so I kind of removed them from my mind, just assumed that they were for charity. Rava felt bad that Abaye would get regards from the Heavenly Academy every Erev Shabbos, whereas he himself, Rava, only got it once a year on Erev Yom Kippur. They said to him, Rava, don't feel bad. You protect the entire city. There's nothing to feel bad about. Friends, that was Daf Chaf Aleph Masechta Taanis. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.